the commander-in-chief under full-blown attack as Democrats in the House plow forward with impeachment. Did the president's bid to trigger a Ukrainian investigation of Joe Biden truly violate America's law? In the U.S. Senate, lawmakers vote to call off the state of emergency on the Mexican border. Could the president's move to build the wall with military dollars backfire with fellow Republicans? And the Texas trial that's drawn the eyes of the nation. Was the killing of unarmed Botham Jean a terrible accident or murder in the first degree? I'm Greg Rugen, and welcome to What's Your Point, where our panelists call it like they see it. Let's greet them. Starting us off, legendary reporter turned investigative media consultant Wayne Dolcefino. Next up, legal analyst and Houston attorney Carmen Roe. In the 3 spot, Bob Price, associate editor of Breitbart Texas. Batting cleanup, Craig Jackson, constitutional law professor at TSU's Thurgood Marshall School of Law. Next up, conservative attorney and Second Amendment expert Michelle Maples. And closing us out on the hot corner, writer, educator, and radio host Antonio Diaz. Let's begin. It is entirely fitting that we pause to pay honor to a fallen hero. Friday, Harris County Deputy Sandeep Dhaliwal was fatally ambushed by a repeat felon on parole. Dhaliwal was a deeply respected trailblazer who served our community with enormous integrity and commitment as the first Sikh officer in the department's history. He leaves behind a wife and 3 children. May he rest in peace. With that, we take up our lead topic. The die is cast, the Rubicon crossed. Democrats led by Speaker Nancy Pelosi have launched impeachment proceedings against President Donald J. Trump. This most extreme of measures was triggered by the emergence of a whistleblower report found to be credible, alleging that during a July phone call, Mr. Trump pressured Ukraine's president to launch an investigation into political rival Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden. The younger Biden served as a highly paid board member of a Ukrainian natural gas company suspected of corruption. Critics say the appointment of the then vice president's son to the post while his father oversaw Ukrainian relations in the Obama administration amounts to payola and influence peddling. On the flip side, the whistleblower contends that during his communication with the Ukrainian president, Mr. Trump inferred that delivery of American military aid would depend on delivery of action directed at the Bidens. Supporters of the president say this alleged quid quo pro is a figment of hostile Democratic imaginations. What is not imaginary is Mr. Trump's clear request that Ukraine work with Attorney General William Barr and the president's personal attorney Rudy Giuliani on an investigation of the current frontrunner for the Democratic nomination. Is that illegal? Is that an abuse of presidential power? Wayne Dolcefino, you're shaking your head.
You know what? I got to tell you, I really think we need like another cabinet member, like the psychologist, okay? This country is going crazy. And look, I look at this journalistically. You talk about this whistleblower. Did you know that the intelligence community changed the rules for whistleblowers to make it that you didn't have to be a first-hand observer of the conduct? We're making this whistleblower out to be like, I don't know. I mean, he could be a great guy or a great woman, but this person was not involved in any of this, number one. The Democrats were ready to impeach even before they even saw the transcript. The transcript isn't what a lot of folks, including your introduction, want it to be. He didn't pressure anyone. And you know what? If I'm Trump's advisor, I say, hell yeah. Ukraine is a corrupt country. It was corrupt when Obama was president. We had problems then. If I'm Trump, I say, you know what? I've spent 3 years with you people trying to dig up all kinds of crap on me. And you know what? Yeah, I told him to investigate Joe Biden and his son because I don't know too many people who are on drug problems who get a $50,000 a month deal. And for people to all start their stories with no evidence, there's no evidence. It's just nonsense.
Okay, we have experts on the law here. Craig Jackson, you've been looking at the facts. What's your take?
Well, several things. There's a lot to unpack here. First of all, to me, even ask a foreign leader for a political favor, that to me is impeachable. But before we start talking about whether or not there's a quid pro quo here, reading that impeachment, the transcript, like reading a Mario Puzo novel. It's straight out of the opening scene of The Godfather. There is quid pro quo there if you read it. I mean, David French of the National Review read it and says, and National Review. I'm posting National Review on my Facebook site these days, guys. That's hard to deal with. But he says he could easily make a case with those facts that are in that transcript. So it's enough there, but you don't need it for impeachability. If we can impeach a person for lying about an affair, certainly this would cover.
Michelle Maples, was this a shakedown, or is this just another excuse to go to impeachment?
Let's take this in two parts, right? Let's take a look at the call number one. There was no quid pro quo. There was no, I will give you military aid if you give me the dirt on the Bidens. The Bidens have plenty of dirt that is easily findable without the Ukrainians. Not a problem. Number two, let's look at the complaint. The complaint is 100% based on hearsay. In the very first page, it says, I do not have direct knowledge of this call. However, I have sources who have direct knowledge of that call. That sort of evidence is not even admissible in court because it's so unreliable. So what we're going to do is we're going to impeach a president. We failed in the Mueller witch hunt, and now we're going to try this on pure hearsay. Now at least the Democrats are being honest that they just don't like Trump. They don't like the way the 2016 election turned out, and now they're going to try to impeach him on hearsay.
Tony, my cell phone was blowing up with texts from you saying impeach, impeach, impeach. What do you think of this?
Well, it's actually mind-blowing where Trump supporters, their best argument seems to be that the president can break the law a little bit. That's pretty much what they're saying when they're saying, well, it's not a big deal. And the equivalent, let's make this clear for people on the streets, this would be like the president coming up to a mechanic shop and saying, hey, you know what? There's audits. Why don't you fix my engine and don't charge me? That would be similar, but it's not as bad because the national security is not at stake. Millions of dollars aren't involved as well. And here's the other thing. It is false to say all Democrats wanted to impeach Trump early on. Pelosi has waited and waited and waited. She was looking at the political wins. No, she wanted evidence. And we have hard, concrete evidence. The transcripts reveal it all. So right now, I think it is Democrats. It's time to, one, impeach, impeachment inquiry, impeachment trial, and then finally impeached. Let's bring law and order back to the White House.
Bob Price, rebuttal.
Where's your fruit? Where's your fruit, Bob?
Yeah, where do you start on that? So Adam Schiff sat there on the dais of the House Judiciary Committee and flat out lied to the American people. He made up what he wished the transcript said and read that instead of what the transcript actually said. This is a naked attempt to overthrow a duly elected president of the United States by the intelligence community, with their conspirators in the White House, in the White House and in Congress. It is obscene. If they can do this to Trump, they can do it to you. They can do it to you. They can do it to anybody that they politically disagree with.
Clinton.
Bill Clinton lied under oath.
Right,
that is a different thing. That is an articulable crime. There's no articulable crime here. So the issue of this is absolutely obscene. There'll be an impeachment probably, but that'll go to the Senate. The Senate makes the rules on how the impeachment is handled. It'll probably get read into the record and dismissed from there.
Okay. Carmen Roe, if you were hired tomorrow to prosecute this case,
do it.
Do you have, is this strong evidence?
No. I mean, I think this is another case where Trump is walking between the raindrops, and most experts will tell you there's no federal crime here. Mostly because the value and some of the other details about this call are not there. And on top of everything else, of course, this is all based on third-party perspective that we think that he said, and we don't even have the transcripts. And so, no, I think that just as Wayne said, you don't need a crime to impeach a president. But in this case, I don't think there is a crime. I think there probably is going to be an impeachment proceeding, and I think it's going to be taken care of quickly in the Senate.
20 seconds for saving time.
We're having an election in a year. All this proves to me is that Democrats really don't think they can beat Trump. Otherwise, let's just vote in a year. And everybody get back to work and actually do something, because we're doing nothing but arguing about Trump.
Jackson.
Point about the crime. You don't need a crime. Obviously, Lindsey Graham said as much in the Clinton trial.
They had a crime.
But you don't need a crime. This is what Lindsey Graham said. And secondly, just importantly, the letter, the witness whistleblower letter, is really kind of a I guess, a list of witnesses to interview in the proceeding.
Excellent.
In other words, so it's a process.
And that's the only good thing about it. That's the only, he's right about that.
Okay, I'm sure we're going to talk
But it
about this
says so.
again.
They
We've
get
got to
to
go to
write
break.
it
When we come back, as military budgets are rated to fund the wall, the president loses another Senate vote on the border barrier. We will talk about the fallout when we come back. Welcome back. Eclipsed by the Ukraine scandal and subsequent lurch toward impeachment was an actual vote on Capitol Hill. By a 54-41 margin, the U.S. Senate approved a resolution calling for the end of President Trump's emergency declaration on the U.S.-Mexico border. At the core of this second repudiation is more than $3.5 billion in funding for the border wall, which the president is, and I'll say this editorially, pilfering from military construction projects in 23 different states. A money grab made possible by the emergency declaration, with the Lone Star State losing $39 million worth of planned military construction. Texas Senators Ted Cruz and John Cornyn were among 11 Republicans joining Democrats in opposition to the president. The president is expected to once again veto the measure when it reaches his desk. Clearly, there's a cost to this controversial wall, and it looks like our service members are now being asked to pay it. Is it worth the sacrifice? Bob Price, I think I know your answer.
Border security is national security. There are people coming across that wall from terrorist countries. There's a direct pipeline from the Middle East and other countries where there's state-sponsored terrorism through Central America, South America, Central America, through Mexico and up to the United States. A lot of that through unsecured sections of the Texas border and Arizona border. We had thousands and thousands of migrant families being put in danger crossing the border in Arizona in the middle of the desert by areas that were guarded only by pedestrian barriers, not by vehicle barriers, not pedestrian barriers. The National Defense utilization of funds is underway. They're building those new walls in those areas. They're going to secure that area. More than 300 people have died, more than 1,500 in the last 5 years crossing those borders. It is insane that we don't take some kind of umbrage to that and stop the situation that causes these deaths.
Okay, Carmen, real quickly.
You know, I think that I commend Trump on his tenacity. He said he's going to build the wall. He's going to keep pushing to build this wall, and it's not going to stop. And I think he's going to use whatever means he can to get it done.
Okay, we're going to have more on this topic after the break. Welcome back. We're going to pick up where we left off and continue our discussion of funding for the border wall and the Senate vote this past week to end the state of emergency declared by the president. Tony Diaz, I assume you welcome this vote. But you're on the side of our two Republican senators.
Well, I'm glad people are putting Texas first, because this is going to affect Texas military bases, and the election's coming up. I can see it happening right now. I want to remind folks that Trump lied. He promised to build a wall and have Mexico pay for it. What they should have been chanting is, build a wall, who's going to pay? The military is going to pay for it. And here's another part of all this. Trump is actually mismanaging the border just so that he can slap together his election platform to scare people into voting for him. Of course, everything with this invasion, which has cost lives. But I want people in Texas to understand that this is kind of like if your dad went to Vegas and said, I'm using your college fund, because he promised you one thing, but he's basically making your life worse. Here in Texas, we're going to have Fort Bliss on the chopping block. Camp Bowles has vehicle maintenance shop on the chopping blocks. Fort Bliss has supply support activity on the chopping block. Defense access roads on the chopping block. Fort Hood. Anybody heard of Fort Hood here in Texas? Well, guess what? Their vehicle maintenance shop is on the chopping block, and supply support activities on the chopping block, because the president has mismanaged the immigration issue and is trying to use stereotypes to steer the nation instead of wisdom. I'm glad we're putting Texas first. Stop this nonsense, and don't let the president run away with power.
Okay, Wayne Dolcefino, is Tony off base?
Yeah, dude, Tony is like off the whole
It's
set.
called the truth. You don't like Fort Bliss?
Look,
you don't like Fort Bliss?
Yeah, you know what?
You like Fort Bliss.
But I found out, Tony, a second ago that the vehicle maintenance facility won't be redone. I hope we're not attacked today. Because that could really...
What about Pendleton with potable water?
Tony, look, here's the bottom line. We have to control our borders. There's now 17,000 troops in Mexico on the border, and I haven't heard much about the immigration last month because all you guys are all freaked out about, some phone call. But the reality is we need to have border security. Low-income workers in this town deserve it. Bob talks about people coming across the border. I want to talk about people who live here. I don't want to give health care to people that aren't citizens of this country. I don't even want to give education to them. I believe we need to spend our money on the people who are rightfully here, and they can come here. They can migrate here.
They can bring you food at their table at the restaurant. They can take care of your elderly under the table because they don't have enough money.
That doesn't make it right, Tony.
But you live in it. You live in it.
I want to hear what Craig Jackson thinks about this. I want to hear what Craig.
The whole thing bothers me because it's a separation of powers issue. I know the Emergency Act. At least the one court has said that's appropriate under the law, under the Constitution, under the Act itself. But I'm concerned about the misuse of that. Because basically the president is taking money that Congress has appropriated. There's a significant separation of powers issue here that's going to get resolved at some point. So that's a problem, and that's my concern, because Congress has the role of appropriating money and specifying where the money goes. The president should not be able to, without good reason, and not just manufactured reasons, but good reason, come in there and disrupt that situation between Congress and the president.
Michelle, do you agree with Bob's equivalence that defense of our border is part of our national defense and that the use of this funding source is legitimate?
It absolutely is. If we have porous borders, number one, then what's the point of being the United States of America? Then we're just letting the cartel in, we're letting these gangs in, which causes crime to skyrocket, and we're not going to be held in fear to illegal aliens who are here. And it's just not fair to those who did it correctly. And to Professor Jackson's point, the Supreme Court last summer said President Trump could do this. Now, he also brings up a good point that this is open to abuse. It's open to abuse from a President Warren who wants to put a ban on all drilling and tank our economy. It is open to a President Bernie who wants to have population control for climate change. But then let's go back to Tony's point about where is this money actually being spent. This is not hurting the readiness of our military. We're not sending our military out to Afghanistan without body armor because we've taken the money away to fund the border wall. That's not true. These are infrastructure construction projects, and the dining hall at Fort Bliss or in San Antonio can wait for our border to be secured.
I guess the troops at Camp Pendleton don't need potable water. I mean, this is for schools. This is for West Point. This is what I don't get. I understand the sensible arguments. Let's do something sensible. Let's do something profound. Let's keep the cartels out. Let's keep the military strong. But don't rob Peter to pay Paul. And it really is like your dad taking your college fund and spending it on Vegas because he messed up all year long. Use your
Bob,
head,
final
America.
word on this.
Okay, what we saw earlier was a typical Democrat liberal ploy. When a conservative starts making a valid point on an issue, the liberal talks over the top of them and tries to keep them from being heard.
I'm waiting for a valid point.
See, here it goes again.
Okay, hold on.
So the amount of money that we're talking about in this appropriation is a rounding error in the defense budget. Literally, just even in the vehicle maintenance portion of the defense budget. We're not talking billions of dollars here. We're talking millions of dollars, which is a lot of money, but it's nothing compared to the Department of Defense budget. The issue is the emergency is not over. Even though the numbers have decreased crossing the border the last couple of months, the family migration crossings at the border are up 245% over what they were during this same period last year.
Okay. Carmen, did you hear any compelling arguments there?
I think it's all fascinating, but again, it's politics going back and forth, and that's what it's going to continue to be. It has been since Trump announced it in the beginning, and it's going to continue to be a focal point because immigration is complicated stuff, and I don't think any wall or no wall is going to change what is a much deeper issue.
Trump doesn't know what he's doing.
Good discussion, you guys. Up next, the race for Houston mayor growing more intense with hard-hitting ads peppering the airwaves. Will the messaging persuade voters to opt for change? That question on our table when we return. Welcome back. In the race for Houston mayor, the battle for hearts, minds, and ballots is growing more intense. During a week when a Harris County deputy was fatally ambushed, candidate Tony Busby put up an ad contending our community is under siege from criminals.
We are anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 police officers short in this city. We are razor thin.
Criminals get away with murder.
We need a safer Houston. We need Tony Busby.
Meantime, candidate Bill King looking to land a heavy blow on the incumbent with this spot linking Sylvester Turner with strip clubs and human trafficking.
Yet, we have a mayor who takes tens of thousands in campaign contributions from strip club owners, including one sued by the city for trafficking.
Okay, team, is this messaging hitting the mark? I'm going to go to Michelle Maples.
I think so. So let's start with Tony Busby's. And I think all of us will agree that there is a steady decrease in violent crime. Actually, however, homicides are actually up last year and this year. And also, we just saw this awful, awful murder in cold blood of Deputy Dhaliwal. So, yes, that is a compelling ad that we need to get more police officers on the streets, out from behind their desks and on the streets protecting our neighborhoods. And then second, to Bill King's ad, another very, very compelling ad. Houston is the sex trafficking capital of the world. There's a symposium this week on this exact issue with Dan Crenshaw. And so, yes, bringing that out into the limelight that this individual took funds from a strip club that is a well-known sex trafficking hub it's hypocritical.
Final word, Carmen.
Fear mongering. That's it. People aren't getting away with murders in Houston. As a criminal defense attorney, I find that offensive. But I think that these are the same ads that we expected to see. The real issues, flooding and things like that, is something I would rather see than rerunning something that we've already talked about many times here in the city. Important things to say, sure. But are those the things that are going to turn the mayoral race? I hope not.
Hey, 15 seconds. Those work for you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Bill's ad is fine. Turner takes money from all kinds of people. I mean, so like, if we're going to start, I think we know the answer to that question.
Real quick.
I had the privilege of moderating a mayoral debate forum, which the mayor skipped, by the way. Again, it was held by the Village Republican Women. Both these guys are making great points that the mayor needs to be fired. The voters have to choose who's going to get hired.
Okay, well, that'll be up to them, for sure. Still ahead. He fell just short of winning the city's top job 4 years ago. Now candidate Bill King is making a major push to reverse that outcome. The well-known businessman and columnist is back in our hot seat, so stay with us. Welcome back. He's no stranger to the citizens of Houston, or for this program, for that matter. An unapologetic moderate and budget hawk businessman and columnist Bill King is embroiled in the battle to become our city's next mayor. With the election just 5 weeks away now, we welcome him back to the hot seat. Bill, I'm going to start with this. We just saw a piece of your ad criticizing Mayor Sylvester Turner for accepting contributions from strip club owners. Clearly, you think this is an important issue.
Yeah, we talked a lot today about the death of outrage, that just nothing really offends us anymore. It's not okay to take money from strip clubs, and especially strip clubs that the city has sued for human trafficking. I mean, this is not like just any old strip club. About half the money came from clubs that we have actually sued in the past for human trafficking. That is not okay. And look, we cannot fight human trafficking. We have no moral authority to do that when we have a leader who's in bed with these people.
Bill, you've spent a lot of time crunching the numbers. And bottom line, and I've heard you speak, you say the mayor's claim of a balanced budget is a big fat lie perpetrated on the public. How deep is our city in the red on an annual basis based upon your findings?
Yeah, well, the idea that we've got a balanced budget is complete nonsense. And we know this because we have an audit every year. And I don't know if Sylvester's had time to look at the audit, but what that audit shows is that the city, across all accounts, had a $300 million deficit last year. But in that critical general fund where we pay for public safety and most of the services, it was a negative $435 million. We've never had a deficit that large in the city's history. It's unsustainable.
Okay, we lost a law enforcement officer this week, and so people are thinking about crime. Has Mayor Turner kept his public safety promises that he made in 2015 on all those campaign appearances you were at as well? Has he kept his promises, and what would you do differently if mayor?
Well, he specifically promised we would have 540 new police officers by now. That was the claim that was made over and over on the campaign trail. It's out on video. Anybody can go find it pretty easily. And we have about the same number of police officers as we had last time. Let me just correct one thing that was said on the panel here. Violent crime is absolutely up for the last 3 years. Now, property crimes appear to be flat or down some, and this comes at the end of a very long decline of violent crime. But violent crime in the first 3 years of the Turner administration are up about 11% over what it was during the Parker administration. And we should have had a more robust response to that.
Last time you were here, you laid out your flood prevention plan. Since then, Imelda hammered the city. You've been out in Kingwood talking to some of the victims. What are you going to tell us now?
Well, there are a couple things. One, I walked in with these flooded houses, and the smell is just, overwhelms you, and it reminded me of the couple times I've been flooded in my life. And the tragedy of this is really, the personal tragedy is really incredible for these people. But it also reminds me that this is a situation where these people are being flooded by a development that's going on right across the county line, and it brings up all the issues of how do we manage development so it doesn't flood existing properties. How do we manage a flood policy between jurisdictions? I mean, all of it's a microcosm right there in Elm Grove, and we just got to do a better job on this. I've laid out this detailed plan. I think it'll help a lot if we get on the plan and start working it.
You said you would spend every single dollar collected in the drainage fee on drainage.
Correct.
You want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, so this is something that just aggravates me to no end. We passed a drainage fee, and everybody told it was going to be spent on drainage. Now, if you read the fine print, it said it could be spent on streets and traffic and all sorts of other things, but people thought it was going to be spent on drainage. And so for the last 7-8 years, we've been collecting this. Almost $1 billion has been paid by Houstonians now. About half that money's been spent on drainage, and about half of it's been spent on something else. And it is outrageous and not illegal, but it's terrible public policy. And I've laid out a plan where I'm going to make it all transparent and spend every penny of it on drainage.
Bill King, 5 weeks from the election, and many voters are torn between supporting you or supporting Tony Buzbee. Now I'm going to ask you, tell us what the most critical fundamental issues that separate the two of you are.
Well, look, I'm prepared to go do the job. My background and my business life, and frankly, for most of the last decade, I've been studying these issues intently. I really understand them. We're at a critical point in the city's history. We don't have time for on-the-job training. We don't have time to bring in experts. I swear, over the last 30 or 40 years, if I had $100 for every time some candidate said, I'm going to bring in experts, I'm going to get the best minds together, why don't we just elect the expert? I mean, look, Tony concedes he hasn't read the budget. He hasn't read our audit. I mean, can you imagine going in and applying for a CEO job someplace and telling the board, I haven't gotten around to reading the budget and I haven't read the audit, but I've got energy and backbone, so you ought to name me as your CEO. I mean, you'd be laughed out of the room. Like, I'm ready to go do this job. Houston's got serious problems. We need a serious leader.
Okay, I want to say for the record, we've invited the mayor on this program for every one of the 209 episodes. He has yet to come up. There hasn't been a single public or private poll that I've seen that has the incumbent mayor drawing more than, say, about a third of the voters. What does that tell you?
Well, I think the reason Sylvester's not showing up here or at any of the forums. By the way, by this time in the campaign, I think he and I have done about 40 joint appearances. He's done 4 so far this time. And the reason he's not doing well in the polling, that he's not showing up, is he has an indefensible record. I mean, if you look, what is better off than it was 4 years ago? I can't say a single thing that's any better. Our finances are still a mess. The streets are still embarrassing. People's homes are flooding at a higher rate than ever. We have problems now that we didn't have before. Garbage isn't getting picked up. We can't get the recycling taken to the recycling center. I mean, in every measurement that you can come up with, this is a failed administration.
Bill King, thanks for taking the hot seat.
You bet, absolutely.
We'll see you again. Okay, when we come back, a teenager's angry rant over climate change captivates the world. Was it an alarmist stunt or a righteous outcry from an emerging generation? Stay with us. What's your point? We'll be right back. Welcome back. This week, 16-year-old climate activist Greta Thunberg unleashed a severe tongue lashing on world leaders at the UN.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you?
Some saw the outcry as just and immensely compelling. Others called it exploitative and psychologically unhinged. Question, is Thunberg's outrage a harbinger of widespread generational activism? Tony, you talk to young people all the time.
She's brilliant, and there's a whole generation like her. And I get why right-wing middle-aged men are scared of her, They're in climate denial. She's all about that. They probably want English only. She speaks English and Swedish. A lot of these right-wingers want a wall because they're scared of open borders. She's running an open borders global campaign. And not only is there another generation, when they're in power, which will be soon, they're going to make AOC seem conservative. And the great news is she just sold the 2-book deal to Penguin.
Oh, wow. Okay, Wayne, amateur psychologist.
I don't want to start speaking Swedish, Tony. I'd
like to see that.
I'm just going to tell you something that when she said her life had been ruined and destroyed, there's something else going on here, right? I mean, I don't know what her parents were telling her, but something really weird when someone who should be like having fun thinks their life is destroyed because there's a seal somewhere that may have to move. I'm sorry.
Okay, Professor Jackson.
On behalf of the 1, 2, 3 boomers up here, I apologize to that generation because, you know, they fought a war when we were kids. And they wouldn't even let us vote until 1971 or 2. Yep. And they fought a war. And we protested like crazy. I mean, the 68, remember? Well, you may not remember 68, but I remember 68. And 68 was something else. For anyone in my age group to be offended by her saying what she said is really a travesty.
Okay, Bob, 10 seconds, 15 seconds.
Yeah, I wasn't offended, but I was definitely entertained. She had some fabulous dramatic actress training in there and brought forth a lot of stuff. You know, as we're talking about all this global warming going on, there's a blizzard going on right now, an early blizzard in Colorado. The ski season's going to open early. Everybody will be happy about that. So, yes, there is climate change, because the climate always changes, and you know there's now deserts where there used to be glaciers.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on Greta. Still to come, Amber Geiger says she shot to kill because she feared for her life. Should a Dallas jury believe the ex-cop's claim that the death of Botham Jean was a terrible accident? Our team is ready to dive in, can hardly wait to hear from them, so stay with us. Welcome back. 240 miles to our north, a truly compelling trial underway. Former Dallas police officer Amber Geiger is charged with murder after walking into an apartment she thought was her own and fatally shooting its resident, Botham Jean, an accountant who was eating ice cream. Friday, the 31-year-old defendant took the stand asking for forgiveness, but also claiming she thought the 26-year-old Jean was going to kill her.
Why did you fire?
I was scared. I was scared this person's apartment was going to hurt me. And I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I hate that I have to live with this every single day of my life. And I ask God for forgiveness. And I hate myself every single day.
Okay, panel, is this murder, manslaughter, criminally negligent homicide, or just a terrible accident? Can hardly wait to hear from Carmen Roe.
My people, this is a murder case. It's interesting because the defensive theory seems to be one of maybe accident, but the problem is she admits to the intentional killing of this man. And then she says what the law requires, which is she feared for her life, which is the only justification she can have to shoot him. The problem is we have a gentleman who's sitting on his couch eating ice cream. And so the facts are inconsistent with the defensive theory they're putting out there. This is murder. It's not an accident. It's fascinating, though, because for all those who may not know, it's live fed into the TV. And so you can watch the body cam. You can hear her minutes after the shooting occurs. You can hear how she's talking to this deceased man on the ground as they're trying to revive him. It's an unbelievably thrilling presentation that includes sexting and officers' behavior outside of the workplace. So it's fun to watch, but I think ultimately it's a murder case. So.
Okay, I know from our pre-game discussion, Bob Price has a different position.
Well, I'll defer to learned defense counsel turned prosecutor here, but in this case, imagine you walk up to what you believe is your apartment door at 2 o'clock in the morning. The door is ajar. It's open. You're a cop. You're in uniform. You're trained to deal with burglars. You walk in and there's someone in your apartment, what you believe is your apartment, and immediately when you go into that mode, you get into tunnel vision. You don't see that it's not your couch. You don't see that it's not your paintings on the wall. You don't see that it's not your television. You see a perpetrator, and Texas law allows the use of deadly force against a burglar inside your home.
Okay, Professor Jackson, should that be our law?
Well, it also allows the use of deadly force against a burglar inside your home. It was Botham Jean's home. So the fact
But
of
she
the matter
didn't
is-
know that. She thought she
yeah,
was
but,
in her home.
Yeah, but if she's afraid for, I mean, come on. Where's the training here? I mean, the prosecution says she had options. You know, and if we're going to find excuses for people to engage in defense of their homes, well, a person ought to be protected inside their home at some point. There has to be some responsibility here. There has to be some accountability. You know, I mean, it goes both ways, and it just doesn't apply to white officers. It also applies to other persons as well.
Okay, Michelle Maples, I mean, do you see criminally negligent homicide? I mean, I don't think anybody believes she wanted to kill this guy, but she did.
But we got a dead guy
Yeah.
sitting on his couch eating ice cream in his own home. This is fascinating. I'm really interested to see what the jury comes back on this one. So what we have to look at is the mental state of this officer at the time of the use of deadly force. So like Carmen said, we've got a murder here. Murder takes intent. Did you intentionally pull that trigger to cause the death of that individual? And the answer is yes. Now, is there a defense? Did she act in self-defense? And that's sort of the crux there on this murder charge. Then we can go down the rung to manslaughter. Is there going to be a manslaughter conviction? Probably not, because the mental state for manslaughter is she unintentionally, unknowingly killed this individual. So we see this with like DWIs, right? Was when somebody gets behind the wheel drunk and kills a family of 6, right? She intentionally pulled that trigger. There's no doubt about it. She admitted to it on the stand. And then we go down to the rung to criminal negligent homicide. And that mental state is a person acted below the standard of care that a normal person would have acted, right? She should have known the substantial risk of her behavior. Now, I think she probably knew the substantial risk of pulling the trigger would likely cause the death of an individual. But what I found very, very compelling in this case was the testimony of other residents at the apartment stating how confusing the layout is and the multiple times that they themselves had gone into the wrong apartment, or they themselves were sitting there in their apartment and someone came in thinking it was theirs. That is going to be a very, very interesting question before the jury, and I think we've got a criminal negligent homicide conviction on this one.
Okay, we're going to continue to follow this. Coming up, a major factual faux pas on the issue of firearms. What Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee said that has heads shaking in disbelief. We tackle the topic after the break. Welcome back. A major oops moment from a well-known Houston area lawmaker pushing gun control. Here's Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee talking about the semi-automatic assault-style weapon she believes should be banned.
My bill that I've introduced dealing with the caliber weapon, I've held an AR-15 in my hand. I wish I had it. It is as heavy as 10 boxes that you might be moving. And the bullet that is utilized, a 50 caliber, these kinds of bullets, need to be licensed and do not need to be on the street.
Congresswoman Jackson Lee has been a passionate advocate for the causes she supports, but this was a big-time fail. When you are seeking to change the nation's laws, you have to get the facts right. So I'm going to go to Bob Price. There was a big issue on the 50 caliber round and the AR-15.
Well, first off, I understand that the Congresswoman hasn't been asked to carry a box heavier than a Kleenex in many, many decades. So she may not understand how weight works, but the average AR-15 weighs about 6.5 to 7 pounds. And I don't know what the weight has to do with its lethality or firepower or anything else anyway. But the caliber of the ammunition, this is a 50 caliber round. This is what she said is being fired in an AR-15. That is absolutely an outrageous lack of knowledge about the firearms industry. This is a .223 round. You put the two of these things side by side, and you can see that they're a little hard to tell. I can see where you might mistake this one for this one, but that's ridiculous. The scary thing is that she's carrying legislation to affect things that she absolutely has no knowledge about.
Okay, Tony.
Well, he brought props, smart artist go, but what did she say? There's 10 boxes? Well, here's 10 boxes, Bob.
Yeah,
and I'm
Kleenex
moving
boxes.
10 boxes, so she was not wrong in some capacity, but Also, no matter what she says, she's going to get critiqued. You know, Beto O'Rourke made a passionate statement about these sort of weapons, and he's been critiqued as well. So let's not pretend logic is going to get in the way of people who oppose any sort of smart gun legislation. I really wish we could all sit down, come up with some common ground, because you're going to get voted out of office if you don't at least get reasonable about it.
Final word on this, Michelle.
I don't expect Sheila Jackson Lee to be an expert in guns. I don't expect her to be an expert in climate or a scientist. However, what I do expect is her staff to give her a memo with talking points that are rooted in fact and that are not these outrageous, silly statements. How can we trust our elected officials to guide legislation if they don't know A from Z on issues?
Okay, got to leave it there. We'll be right back.